The taking of risk to get rich. Hey everyone, it's Wolfgang. So I want to introduce the subject by saying, becoming wealthy is in some ways it's controversial. People have opinions about it, but in my opinion, there is absolutely no shame in having independent financial means. Nothing to apologize for. If you worked for it, if you're not a trust fund kid, if you work for it, you can support yourself, you can support family members, and you can support worthy causes. So there's absolutely no shame in getting independent financial means, becoming wealthy. There's nothing wrong with it. And what I want to talk about is sort of a systematic way of doing it so that there's some margin of safety involved so that you can sort of reliably say this is going to work, most likely. Maybe not guaranteed, but it's most likely going to work. So how to take a risk to get rich, okay? The key point of this entire video is right here, okay? You should know in advance that the risk you're considering taking could lead to becoming wealthy. Could, the key word is could lead to getting wealthy. And how do you know it could lead? Because other people have done it. Other people have succeeded in the area that you're looking at. If you can identify one or two or more people who have attained independent financial means in an area that you're interested in, that's a really good sign. That should give you a lot of confidence that if you work towards it, you could, get some semblance of what they were able to attain. Maybe not the same level, but some measure of success. If there are other people who have already paved a path through the forest and have become wealthy. So obviously, there's not necessarily a guarantee, and you're going to have to make sufficient effort. But the key point is identify in advance that the risk could lead to getting rich, and the easiest way to do that is to find examples of people who have done it, and not like 100 years ago or 200 years ago. I mean, in recent times, because things change over time, right? So here are some examples. Areas you might be interested in. Financial services, all of us use financial services. Banking, online brokerages, some of us invest in private investments, hedge funds. An example of that type of company is Citadel, founded by Ken Griffin. He founded Citadel, which is a hedge fund and financial services firm, in his college dorm room. So he's a modern day example of someone who followed financial services, that industry, and it led to wealth. And he works pretty hard. If you study his work ethic, you'll see that he works pretty hard. Technology is another area where you can know in advance that you could become wealthy in technology. NVIDIA, Jensen Huang, XAI, Elon Musk, Spotify, all the different technology companies, Google, Microsoft, all of them, really strong evidence that you can become wealthy in technology if you put in the effort. And again, the magnitude of your success may be different from the stars in the industry, but it's better than being like a history major and expecting to become wealthy as a history major, right? So we're going to identify areas where you know that other people have already become successful and become wealthy. Real estate is another example. The Kennedy family, some parts of the Kennedy family, John F. Kennedy and those folks, some parts of their family attained wealth through real estate. If you look into, if you do a search on real estate billionaires, there's a lot of them. Logistics. I have a family member who did well in logistics, shipping, right? Because everything we buy had to be shipped from somewhere. There's very little manufacturing in most parts of the country. There's some concentrated areas of manufacturing, and then everything gets shipped out. So logistics, especially lately with drones, is a new spin on logistics, is a promising area. I do have a family member who did well in logistics. Medical devices, medical services. I have another family member who did well in medical services. All humans need rely on medical devices and medical services. So that's a really good example of an area that you could attain wealth in. So here's my story. In my 20s, when I was in college, working as an electronics tech full-time and going to college full-time, I was not making a lot of money. I was kind of broke, basically. I kept seeing real estate infomercials on TV. The infomercials claimed that you could become wealthy in real estate. So I started studying, I started trying to find examples, references outside of the infomercials just to validate what I was being told by the infomercials. Is this really true what the infomercials are saying? I looked for examples of people who had become wealthy. So this ties into this idea. I wanted to know in advance if I was going to take the risk of getting into real estate that I could become wealthy, because in my 20s, I knew I wanted to I wanted to attain independent financial means. I wanted to have the autonomy, of not having a boss, not having to work up a corporate ladder. So in my early 20s, I believed this, the infomercial stuff about real estate, but I did validate what I was being told. And I discovered that, yes, I knew that it could lead to getting rich. So I had no experience, no friends and family in real estate at all. So it was a totally new subject for me. So I had to do a lot of reading to convince myself. So when I was in college, I was studying everything I could get my hands on about real estate. So I ended up getting involved in real estate down the line. So the other thing I did in my 20s to pursue this goal, having independent financial means, I chose a college major that I knew had a lot of high-paying jobs upon graduation. And again, this ties into, I knew in advance I could become wealthy in technology because there are tons of examples of people who had already done it. So I knew, I had confidence that there was at least a possibility I could become wealthy with technology. So those are the two things that I tried in my 20s, real estate and software engineering, technology, in pursuit of this goal, independent financial means. It actually worked out quite well. Both of these worked. Both of these things worked. I mean, there's so many examples of people who have become wealthy with real estate and in high technology. It's almost a no-brainer. But that's sort of the idea of this whole video. Identify things that you can validate people have already gone before you and become wealthy. And if you can't find any, tread carefully. Make sure that you've got a lot of confidence that you could be the trailblazer who's the first person to make a fortune in that field. As an example of that, Elon Musk with SpaceX. Very few people had started private rocket companies. I mean, there were entrepreneurs who started model rocket companies, right? Model rocketry, the small things, hobbyists, model rocket hobbyists shoot off in parks, in open fields, but not large scale, putting people up in the space stations. So that was a trailblazer sort of move. So kudos to him, because that was a big risk. But so those are my two ideas, real estate and software engineering. So I bought my first property after doing so much studying. I saw the infomercials. I wanted to do it. I was broke, didn't have enough money. When I graduated a couple years out of college, I had enough money. I bought my first rental property. I described that. It's the first video on my channel, that property. I bought my first property 2 years out of college. I'm still in real estate today. So it's done quite well, right? Because there's tons of people who have done it. It's kind of a no-brainer. You have to work hard. It's not easy. It's not for everybody. But I found that I could do it. And I think a lot of people could. So the same with technology. A lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds have done well in technology. So that's kind of the idea. The one thing I want to say about examples of areas you could consider, what I would do is get a clean sheet of paper and make a list of all the things you're interested in, and then try to find people who have gotten rich in those areas. If you can't find any, and you're not an Elon Musk type of person, you might want to cross those off because you only have so much time in life, and you can set yourself up better if you can establish that there are people who have gone before you and proved that the areas you're interested in can become generators of wealth for you. So that's what I would like to say about the examples. This is a limited set of examples. The best thing you can do is make a list of your own of all the things you're interested in, and then try to go down the list, examples of people who got rich in those areas, and then figure out which ones are the most likely and pursue those. In my case, the real estate infomercials, I didn't take them at face value. I did a lot of study of this subject before deciding that's a likely win for me. That's a likely, that seems doable. Because everyone needs a place to stay and not everyone can afford a home. That's kind of the selling point there. So one of the things you want to do when you're trying to find examples of people who have already attained wealth in an area you're thinking about taking a risk on, okay, you would study high-profile entrepreneurs who've already done it, and then study their work ethic and copy their work ethic. You can stay motivated because if you compare your current work ethic with someone like, if you look at the Jensen Huang's work ethic or Jeff Bezos in Amazon, if you study those guys and see what their hours were, especially Jeff Bezos. I mean, this guy was working till 3 a.m. I mean, on a regular basis, he was a workaholic. If you can compare your current work ethic with the people who have attained a lot of success, that will motivate you to maybe alter your work ethic. And let me just give you a personal story about that. When I graduated from college and I started working as a software engineer, I was operating rental property and working in a software startup at the same time. My boss hated that. He did not like the fact that I was owning and operating rental properties, but I didn't care because I had this goal. I wanted independent financial means, my boss be damned, right? So, but I did have friends who used to tease me about, no life. You have no life, your social activity. So I studied these people. I studied the work ethic of these very successful people. A lot of them, what they have in common, 80 to 100-hour work weeks, very few vacations, if any. They're very hands-on with their products and services. They're not sitting in an office delegating everything. They're actually in with the, if you look at Bill Gates, for example, in Microsoft, he was always hands-on with software development, those teams. So there is a price to pay, if you have people around you who, having independent financial means. It goes back to what I said at the beginning. It can be a little bit controversial if you decide to pursue independent financial means, because there is sort of a stigma associated with rich people. It's sort of as if, okay, this person worked really hard, now he's wealthy, damn him, It's sort of a weird thing in our culture, that if you're successful, somehow that's a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. Again, you can support yourself, your family, and worthy causes, and do a lot of good for society, like providing jobs. Think of all the jobs people like NVIDIA, Spotify, all these companies, Citadel, all the gazillion of companies out there, started by an entrepreneur who took a lot of risk. So, but you have to be willing to, take some teasing by your social, your network, because not everybody wants to work that hard, right? 80 to 100-hour work weeks to become wealthy. Not everybody wants to do that. A lot of people would rather work a corporate job and get promoted and try to keep getting promoted. I knew that was a bad move in the early days. The last corporate job I had was in the startup. The startup went public. I never worked a corporate job in America again, thank God. Because, the problem with corporate jobs is your work ethic and your value may not translate to economic success, because there's too many people around you competing for the promotion, and only one person on the team gets promoted, right? So I didn't like the odds. I did not like the odds. I thought becoming an entrepreneur was a much safer path, because I could chart my own path. And having real estate income, ever since college days, 2 years out of college, I've had real estate income since then. That's been very beneficial. So if you can say to yourself, I don't mind working these long hours, I don't mind being teased by coworkers that I have no life, no social life, then you can do this. You can follow this method. Identify areas that people have already done well in and gotten rich. Study the work ethic of very high profile people in our generation, and copy what their work ethic is, and just work hard. And there's a couple things here I didn't have room on the board for. I wanted to make sure I cover. So one of the things that can help as you're going down this path, if you're taking risks, because again, there's no guarantee that a risk you take will lead to a success. And in fact, a lot of the guys that I studied, like Bezos and Musk and these folks, had failures. So you have to have a tolerance for failing. One of the things you can do to give you comfort when you're taking risks is to have a pool of wealth that is untouchable by creditors. If something went wrong, you would still be able to hold on to a portion of your wealth as long as you didn't sign it away. So as an example, Ken Griffin, who started Citadel, what he did is, one of the things he did anyways, is he bought a large estate in Florida. He's got more than one now, but he's got one principal residence in Florida, a $250 million estate. And the thing about Florida, I wrote this down, Florida is a homestead state, and unless you sign away your home, creditors cannot touch it. So even if you're out there taking risks, even if you fail miserably, there are ways to safeguard a portion of your wealth. Ken Griffin bought a large estate, a $250 million estate in Florida. Florida's homestead exemption provides unlimited protection for a primary residence, your home, from most creditors, meaning that the home cannot be forcibly sold to satisfy debts like credit card bills, medical bills, or personal loans. This protection is outlined in Article 10, Section 4 of the Florida Constitution. So that's one of the things you can do to bulletproof your wealth, is identify things like that, like having a home in Florida and a estate in Florida. And there's other ways to do this too. You should talk to a wealth advisor and bring this up. Ken Griffin bought a home in Florida. That's his primary residence. If all else fails, he's got a $250 million estate. Is there anything else I could do that's like that? And to get some other ideas. But that will help you as you go through if you're taking risks. But the key point of this video is if you're going to take risks to get rich, know in advance that the risk could lead to becoming wealthy. And the way you know that is if you can find one or more, and preferably more, people who have already done it. And so I hope this gives you guys some ideas. It worked for me. And, depending on your interest, you may decide that financial services is much more interesting than real estate. But you should, like I said, make a list of your interests, find people who have succeeded, and then go for it. But be willing to work really hard to get there, okay? Because that's generally what it takes. If you have any questions, please post in the comments. I'll try to answer them. And I really want to thank everyone for watching, and have a great day.